took that delivery job in rural Oregon, the air felt heavier than usual, thick with moisture, as if the forest itself were exhaling onto the road. Midnight had already slipped past, and the fog had grown so dense that my headlights could barely cut through it. Their beams stretched only a few feet ahead before dissolving into a milky blur. I had done dozens of late-night shifts before, but something about that night made the darkness feel different, alive, almost watchful. My shift was supposed to end at 12:45. I had already driven back toward town, mentally preparing for a hot shower and a few hours of sleep. My phone rested in the cup holder, the delivery app still open, glowing faintly. I wasn't planning to accept another order, not at that hour, not in that weather. But as the road curved along the tree line, the screen lit up with a vibration sharp enough to make me flinch. New delivery request, high priority. I frowned. High priority usually meant surge pricing or a large tip, but when I glanced at the details, a strange unease crept along my spine. The pickup location was normal, a 24-hour diner I'd delivered from many times, but the drop-off address was something I had never seen. Black Fir Road, Residence 39A. A place that, as far as I remembered, didn't exist. I zoomed in on the map. The GPS pin hovered over a narrow road that broke away from the main highway and snaked deep into the national forest, miles past the usual routes. I tried to drag the map around, but the path dissolved into blank space, as if the area hadn't been fully mapped. Only the pin remained, pulsing softly like a living heartbeat. Then I noticed the tip. $78 for a single late-night delivery. That was absurd, suspiciously generous. It felt like bait. I let out a slow breath and leaned back in my seat, listening to the soft rumble of my car's engine. A rational voice in my head whispered that it wasn't worth the risk, that no one should be driving into an unmarked forest road at nearly 1 a.m. But exhaustion had a way of making desperation tempting, and $78 was hard to ignore, especially at the end of a slow week. I hesitated for a long moment, thumb hovering over the accept button. The fog swirled outside as if waiting for my decision. In the rearview mirror, the darkness behind me looked impossibly thick, stretching endlessly into the trees. Just a quick in and out, I muttered to myself. No big deal. But my voice sounded hollow, even to me. The app chimed again, another vibration, urging me to take the order, almost like it knew I was wavering. Against my better judgment, I tapped accept. Instantly, the GPS rerouted, displaying a glowing blue path that didn't exist 10 seconds ago. The directions were simple but unsettling. Drive 12 miles north, turn onto Black Fir Road, continue until arrival. No house numbers, no landmarks, just a single unwavering route. As I merged back toward the diner to pick up the order, a strange pressure settled on my chest, like invisible fingers pressing lightly against my ribs. I checked my mirrors more than usual. Every time the fog shifted, I thought I saw movement, shapes that weren't quite trees, shadows that didn't belong. When I arrived at the diner, it was strangely empty. Normally, even at night, there were at least a few truckers sipping coffee or a couple of employees chatting behind the counter. But that night, only one worker stood inside, wiping down tables with slow, tired motions. He didn't look up when I entered, didn't greet me with the usual "order for pickup?" The bag was already waiting on the counter. A plain brown paper bag, no sticker, no name, no scent of food. I stared at it, a prickling sensation crawling along the back of my neck. Something about the bag felt wrong, too light, too quiet, as if it didn't hold anything at all. "Is this for Black Fir Road?" I asked, trying to sound casual. The worker finally lifted his head. His eyes were dark and unfocused, like he hadn't slept in days. "You're the driver?" he asked, voice flat. "Yeah." He swallowed, his jaw tightening just slightly. "People don't usually take that order." I forced a laugh. "Well, the tip is pretty good." He didn't laugh back. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice. If the road feels like it's getting narrower, or if your radio starts picking up things that don't sound like stations, turn around. Don't keep going. A chill ran through me. What do you mean? But he simply shook his head, as if he regretted saying anything at all, as if he knew more than he should. I picked up the bag, feeling its unnatural lightness. It didn't crinkle like normal paper, almost as if it were stiff, strained. I placed it in my passenger seat, but even with the engine humming and the heater running, I couldn't shake the sense that I had just made a mistake. The forest swallowed the road as I drove. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became, until even the sound of my tires seemed muted. The fog curled across the ground like pale fingers reaching for the wheels. The trees grew denser, taller, leaning inward as if whispering to each other above my car. I checked the app again. Proceed to destination. The blue line stretched forward into darkness. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Something in the distance, far off, between the trees, made a sound, a soft, dragging noise, slow, steady. I swallowed hard and kept driving. The road had already begun to feel like it was leading me somewhere I wasn't meant to go. The farther I drove from town, the more the world behind me seemed to disappear. The last streetlight faded into the fog several miles back, and now the only illumination came from my own headlights carving two narrow tunnels through the swirling white. The road stretched ahead like a thin, dark ribbon, barely wide enough for a single car, its edges crumbling into damp soil and tangled roots. It felt less like a maintained road and more like something nature was slowly reclaiming. The GPS continued to guide me with unnatural certainty, the glowing blue line cutting through the forest with no signs of hesitation. Every few minutes, the map would glitch, flicker, jump, blur, then reorient itself perfectly, as if correcting an invisible mistake. I kept glancing at the delivery bag on the passenger seat, half expecting it to move or shift on its own. It remained still, though it seemed heavier somehow, as if the air around it had thickened. A feeling of isolation settled over me, the kind that makes you realize no one would hear you scream out here, not over the wind rustling through dense branches, not over the muffled hum of your engine swallowed by the fog. I cracked my window for fresh air, but instantly regretted it. A cold, damp smell wafted in, earthy, metallic, almost like wet stone mixed with rust. It didn't smell like the forest I was used to. It smelled older, stagnant, like something that hadn't been disturbed in a long, long time. I rolled the window back up and tightened my grip on the steering wheel. At around the 6-mile mark, the fog thickened into a solid wall, forcing me to slow to a crawl. My high beams only made it worse, turning the mist into a blinding white sheet. The trees seemed to press closer, looming right against the edge of the pavement. Their branches curled overhead, interlocking like skeletal fingers, forming an archway that blocked out whatever faint moonlight might have filtered through. Then I noticed something strange. My radio, normally silent unless I turn it on, began to hiss. At first it was just a soft static, easy to ignore, but slowly the sound grew thicker, sharper, like hundreds of tiny whispers layered over one another. I glanced at the console. The radio was off, completely off. "What the hell?" I muttered. The static rose and fell, as if breathing. For a moment, it almost resembled voices. Not clear, not distinct, just hints of syllables. Like hearing someone talk in another room, muffled by walls. I reached out to switch the radio on and off, hoping it would reset. The moment my finger touched the knob, the static snapped into silence. The car suddenly felt too quiet, unnaturally quiet. I took a steady breath and focused on the road. Maybe it was just interference from all the trees. Maybe I was overthinking it. But the unease from earlier had grown into something sharper, an instinctive warning tightening in my gut. Another mile passed, then 2. The road narrowed even more, forcing me to slow to a near stop. My tires crunched over scattered gravel and fallen branches, each sound amplified in the silence. Then, something darted across the road. A shape, low, fast, impossibly quick, flashed through my headlights and vanished into the trees. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding against my ribs. The car jerked to a stop, the delivery bag sliding slightly on the seat. For a few seconds, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. What was that? A deer? A coyote? Maybe. But the movement was too smooth, too fluid, almost like it glided rather than ran. And it made no sound, not a single rustle of leaves, not a snap of a twig. My breath fogged the windshield. The temperature seemed to drop a few degrees, and a thin layer of condensation crawled across the glass. I wiped it with the back of my hand, but it formed again almost immediately. A metallic tapping sound echoed from the roof of my car. Once, twice, 3 times. I froze. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. The taps were spaced apart, deliberate, like fingertips or claws, testing the surface. I glanced at the tree branches overhead, but none touched the roof. They stood several feet above, motionless. Tap. The sound came again, closer to the windshield this time. Not funny, I whispered to no one. Without thinking, I threw the car into drive and accelerated, tires spitting gravel as I shot forward. The tapping stopped instantly, swallowed by the roar of the engine. The forest blurred into a tunnel of black and white streaks. My heartbeat hammered in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, but the GPS continued to pulse, guiding me deeper and deeper. After another few minutes, the static returned, but this time it wasn't random. It formed a pattern. Soft at first, then clearer. A faint, distant voice emerging through the interference. Stop. Turn. Back. My stomach twisted. I reached toward the radio again, more in fear than curiosity, but before I could touch it, the voice shifted, becoming sharper, louder, almost frantic. Not safe, not safe, not safe. The radio cut out violently, replaced by a deep, pulsing hum that vibrated through the steering wheel and into my bones. I winced, clenching my teeth, trying to ignore it as I focused on the dark path ahead. Then the GPS spoke. Not with the normal automated voice, with a different voice. A woman's voice, low, hoarse, barely above a whisper. Continue forward. My blood turned cold. My GPS had never spoken in that tone, never sounded human, never sounded like someone standing right beside me. The hum stopped. The forest went dead quiet again. All I could hear was my own ragged breathing. My hands trembled on the wheel, but I kept driving. Because for some reason I couldn't understand, some force beyond fear or logic, I felt like I had no choice. Like something had already decided my path for me. Like I was being drawn in. The road ahead grew even darker. And I knew, deep down, that whatever was waiting for me at the end of Black Fir Road was no human customer. The forest seemed to tighten around me the farther I drove, as though the trees themselves were closing ranks, forming a barrier behind me that made turning back feel impossible. My headlights were the only slice of reality I had left, 2 pale beams stretching forward through fog that moved in slow, rolling waves, almost like it was breathing. The road dipped slightly, then curved into a long, narrow stretch lined with towering firs. Their trunks were so straight and tall they looked like pillars holding up the night sky. A thin blanket of mist hugged the ground and drifted up along the slopes, reflecting the glow of my headlights in strange, distorted shapes. Shadows overlapped until they became something unrecognizable, tangled forms that seemed to shift if I stared too long. The GPS glowed faintly from the dashboard, displaying that same unwavering blue line. 1.7 miles until arrival. My pulse quickened. It felt like a countdown, not a distance. For a moment, I took one hand off the wheel to wipe sweat from my forehead. Despite the cold, my skin felt hot and clammy. My breath came unevenly, fogging the inside of the windshield. Each exhale left a smear that distorted the view ahead, so I leaned forward, reducing the distance between myself and the unknown. Then, something new appeared. A small wooden sign on the right side of the road, old, cracked, barely standing. I rolled past slowly, letting my headlights illuminate it. Black Fur RD. The letters were carved deep, but the wood was splintered, as if something with sharp claws had scraped along its surface. The bottom edge was darkened, almost burned. A shiver ran down my spine. "This is it," I whispered. But hearing my own voice made the silence heavier. As soon as I turned on to Black Fur Road, the atmosphere changed. The fog thickened instantly, rolling across the road in heavy sheets. The temperature inside the car dropped sharply, and the air felt viscous, like I was breathing through cold syrup. My headlights flickered twice before steadying, but their glow seemed swallowed by the darkness ahead. Even the engine sounded quieter, muffled, as if it didn't want to disturb whatever lived in the trees. I reached over and turned on the heater. Nothing happened. I adjusted the vents. No air. I twisted the dial harder, but the system stayed dead. Great. The car was choosing the worst possible time to malfunction. I rubbed my hands together for warmth, but my fingertips tingled with a numb, needling sensation. The air felt wrong, empty, and too heavy at the same time. The GPS chimed softly, its screen pulsing with a faint, sickly blue light. 1.2 miles until arrival. A pressure settled between my shoulders, like unseen eyes were studying me through the fog. I kept glancing at the mirrors more than the road. My instinct screamed that something was following me. At first, there was nothing. Just fog, darkness, trees. Then, movement. Fast, low, slipping from one trunk to the next in a blur. I couldn't make out its shape, only that it moved with unnatural smoothness. My pulse jumped as adrenaline surged through my veins. I pressed the accelerator gently, urging the car forward without making any sudden moves. I told myself it was just a deer, a coyote, a trick of the fog. But none of those moved like that. None of them watched the way I felt watched. The trees grew denser as the road narrowed further, their branches intertwined overhead. The canopy blocked out any sign of the sky, leaving only a dark tunnel each time my headlights swept forward. The radio hissed again, not with static this time, with breathing. Soft, hollow, too close. I froze, staring at the console. The radio was still off, but the sound grew louder, filling the cabin with a slow, rasping inhale and an even slower exhale. Each breath felt like it brushed against the back of my neck. "No," I whispered, trembling. "No, no, no." I reached out to slam the radio button off again, even though it already was, but before my finger touched it, the breathing abruptly stopped. Silence. Then a voice slipped through the speakers. A woman's voice, the same one as before, soft and hoarse, like someone speaking through a cracked throat. Almost there. My blood turned to ice. The voice sounded clearer now, closer, like she was sitting in the back seat. I slowly turned my head just enough to glance at the rearview mirror. Nothing. The seats were empty, but the fogged glass of the rear window had a smear on it. A shape. A handprint. Long fingers. Pressed from the outside. I jolted back to the road, heart pounding so hard I felt each beat shaking my ribs. "I'm imagining things," I muttered, though I didn't believe it. A flutter of movement caught my eye, a shadow darting between the trees again, this time closer, much closer. The shape was humanoid, but elongated, too tall for a person, too thin for an animal. The fog swallowed it instantly. I gripped the wheel with shaking hands. 0.8 miles until arrival. The road dipped again. The fog parted briefly, revealing a clearing up ahead. In the distance, through the gray veil, I saw the faint outline of a house. A single structure, isolated, tilted slightly to one side, as if the earth beneath it had shifted. My breath caught in my throat. The house looked wrong, not old, abandoned, devoid of life or light, a wound carved into the forest. But the GPS calmly displayed, "Destination ahead." The radio hissed softly again, and the woman's whisper followed, this time barely audible, as if pressing her lips against my ear. "Don't stop." I accelerated, not because I wanted to follow her command, but because something in the woods moved alongside the car, matching my speed, gliding silently through the trees. I didn't dare look. The clearing grew larger, the house looming clearer through the fog. The front porch sagged, the wooden siding hung in strips. No lights, no signs of life. Even the chimney leaned awkwardly, crumbling near the base. Yet, somehow, it felt like something inside was waiting for me. When I reached the edge of the clearing, the engine sputtered, coughed, then died completely. The headlights flickered once, twice, then went dark, leaving me alone with the fog and the house and whatever had followed me. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel as if it were the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. Outside, in the dense silence, I heard something move, slowly, deliberately, circling the car. A shadow slid past my window, tall, thin, wrong. Then, a whisper drifted through the dark, inches from the glass. "You've arrived."
For several long seconds, I couldn't move. My fingers clenched around the steering wheel, frozen in place as the world outside the car sank into pitch black stillness. Without the headlights, the fog became a formless wall, swallowing the car in a suffocating white cocoon. Even the trees vanished into the haze, leaving me suspended in a small bubble of darkness and fear. My heart hammered against my ribs, so loud it felt like it might give me away to whatever circled outside. I listened hard, straining, holding my breath, hoping the whisper I'd heard was just my imagination stretching too thin. But then it came again, a soft drag. Footsteps, or something like footsteps, moving slowly around the front of the car. The sound of weight shifting across damp earth. I lowered myself slightly in the seat, pulse racing. The windows reflect only darkness, but occasionally the fog thinned enough to reveal a shadow, tall, impossibly thin. It didn't walk so much as glide, like its feet barely touched the ground. The delivery bag sat on the passenger seat beside me, its brown surface now faintly wrinkled and damp from the cold air creeping through the car. I stared at it, wondering why the house had no lights, why the GPS guided me here, why the voice in the radio, whatever it was, wanted me to keep going. Another sound broke the silence. Tap. A single, sharp knock directly on the driver's side window. I flinched violently, slamming my knee into the steering column. Pain shot up my leg, but I barely registered it. My breath hitched in my throat as I slowly, very slowly turned my head. Nothing. Only fog swirling against the glass, curling like pale fingers trying to reach inside. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe. In, out, quiet, controlled. Another tap. This time on the back window, then another on the opposite side. 3 taps, 3 different places, almost at the same time. My stomach twisted with dread. There was more than one. I reached slowly for my phone on the center console, trying not to make sudden movements. The screen lit up, casting a faint glow across the car's interior. My hands shook as I opened the delivery app, intending to hit cancel order and call emergency services. But the screen didn't show the order page anymore. Instead, it displayed a single, blinking message. "You have arrived. Step out to complete."
The words pulsed in a slow, rhythmic pattern. I tried to exit the app, but the back button didn't work. Everything was frozen. I locked the phone and reopened it, but the same message greeted me, unmoving, insistent. A cold realization settled over me. Something was controlling it. A scraping sound suddenly ran along the roof of the car, slow, dragging, metallic. My breath plumed in the cold air as condensation thickened across the inside of the windshield. A faint shape moved across the glass, long fingers trailing down from the top edge, leaving fog trails behind them. The shape was too long, too thin, joints bending at angles no human finger could bend. I ducked down instinctively, pressing myself lower in the seat. My pulse thundered in my ears, overwhelming every other sound. Then, a new noise, soft, gentle, a creak, coming from behind. Not the car, not the forest, the house. Through the fog, I could barely make out its silhouette, tilted, decrepit, sinking into the ground like a dead thing. But now, one faint light flickered to life behind a broken window. Dim, yellow, pulsing like a dying candle. The front door stood slightly ajar. I didn't hear it open, but it was open now. The radio hissed back to life, the static sharp and cold, prickling the air. I froze as a voice slid through the speakers. The same whispering woman's voice, but this time closer, clearer, almost gentle. Take the bag inside. My throat tightened. No, I'm not doing that. The voice continued as though it hadn't heard me. Take it inside. The engine was dead. The heater was dead. The headlights were dead. I couldn't just drive away. But stepping outside felt like stepping into the jaws of something that had been waiting for me since I turned onto that road. Something brushed against the passenger side door. A soft, sweeping touch, like a palm or a face. I tensed so hard my muscles ached. Then the bag moved, only slightly, but enough. A faint shift, like something inside it had rolled or breathed. No, I whispered, fear twisting into my gut. There's nothing in there. There's nothing in there. But I didn't believe it. My phone buzzed violently, startling me. I looked at the screen. A call. No number. Just the word, inside. The call kept ringing, vibrating the entire console. I declined it with a trembling thumb. Immediately, a new message popped up. Hurry. Then another tap on the window. This time, louder, urgent. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to think, trying to breathe, trying to survive. If I stayed in the car, whatever was outside could break in. I was certain of that now. If I stepped out, something would be waiting. And if I ignored the house entirely? The radio crackled again. But instead of the woman's voice, I heard something else. Footsteps. Inside the house. Heavy, slow, coming closer to the open door. Something moving with purpose. And then a second set of footsteps behind it. Lighter, faster. My breath caught. There was more than one inside, too. The front door creaked wider, as though inviting me in or warning me something inside had just reached the threshold. I stared ahead into the darkness. Then, with a sharp click, my car doors unlocked themselves. One by one. Clunk, 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 clunk. All four. My hand flew to the lock button, smashing it repeatedly, but the mechanism didn't respond. It stayed unlocked. The fog outside shifted, revealing a tall, thin silhouette standing just a few feet away from the driver's side door, facing me, motionless, waiting. A low whisper drifted from the radio, barely audible, yet unmistakable. Go to the house. The GPS marker blinked weakly, as if it were struggling to hold on to a signal. Every few seconds, the map rotated on its own, recalculated the route, then froze again. It felt like the device was uncertain whether the road ahead even existed. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield as the world outside grew steadily darker.
The fog wasn't just thick, it moved in slow, deliberate twists, coiling around the trees like it had a mind of its own. The farther I drove, the quieter everything became. Even the usual background noise of the engine seemed muted, swallowed by the forest pressing in from both sides. My phone buzzed once, low signal, before the notification faded. A sense of isolation wrapped around me. I wasn't just leaving town, I was leaving the world where things made sense. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. There was a faint tapping on the roof, a soft, irregular tick, 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 like something lightly striking the metal. Branches, maybe. I tried to ignore it. But the sound had a strange rhythm, almost as if it were mimicking a pattern of knocks. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks again. I forced myself not to look up. My breathing grew shallow as the tapping slowly moved toward the back of the car, then stopped altogether. Silence, a heavy one. Then the headlights flickered. Just once, but enough to make my pulse spike. I told myself it was nothing. Older roads, condensation, moisture messing with the electrical system, totally normal. But even as I tried to rationalize it, the hair at the back of my neck lifted. My instincts were screaming that I shouldn't be here, that turning around was the only sane option. And yet, the delivery app still displayed that impossible tip amount, glowing like a lure in the corner of my screen. Just finish the job, I told myself. Drop the food, go home, never take an order out here again. I drove deeper. The road narrowed until it was barely wider than my car, and the trees arched overhead so densely that the sky disappeared completely. It felt like I was being funneled somewhere, guided through a natural tunnel built to trap anything that entered. The fog thickened until it clung to the windshield like a smear of grease. I switched on the high beams, but the light only bounced back into my eyes, making everything worse. Then I noticed something strange. The temperature inside the car dropped sharply. Not gradually, instantly, as if I had opened a door to a freezer. My breath fogged in front of me. I reached for the heater, but before my hand touched the knob, a whispering sound drifted through the cracked window. Not wind, not leaves. Whispers. Dozens of overlapping voices, too soft to distinguish words, but unmistakably human. I froze. The voices weren't coming from outside. They were coming from the forest on both sides of the road, drifting in and out of the fog, picking up in volume whenever I slowed down, fading away when I accelerated. I pressed harder on the gas pedal. As I drove, I caught glimpses, shapes moving between the trees. Humanoid silhouettes, tall and thin, keeping pace with my car, though I was going at least 40. They didn't run, they just glided, their outlines barely visible through the fog, like shadows refusing to stay in one place. A chill ran down my spine. I kept my eyes locked on the road, refusing to look directly at them. Every instinct told me that acknowledging their presence would be a terrible mistake. Then, the GPS suddenly chimed, loud and cheerful, completely out of place. "You've arrived at your destination." My stomach dropped, because the road ahead ended, abruptly, jaggedly, as if the earth itself had split open, swallowed the rest of the path, and left only a cliff overlooking a black ravine. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded, the seatbelt dug hard into my chest. The world jolted to a stop just a few feet before the edge. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as the engine sputtered and went silent. I sat there shaking, staring into the void, unable to move. My headlights illuminated nothing beyond the cliff, just swirling fog that seemed to breathe in and out like a living creature. And then, slowly, deliberately, someone knocked on my driver's side window. Once, twice, 3 times. The exact same rhythm I had heard on the roof earlier. I didn't look. I didn't dare. I didn't even realize I had stopped breathing until the air finally forced its way into my lungs in a shaky gasp.
The figure, or whatever it was, stood only a few steps away from my crippled car, its outline tall and impossibly thin, like someone who had been stretched beyond human proportions. The fog curled around it possessively, as if hiding parts of its body on purpose. For a moment, neither of us moved. The forest was frozen, suspended in a silence so absolute it felt supernatural. Then the figure tilted its head slightly, as though it were studying me. Not with curiosity, but with recognition. As if it had been waiting, not for a random delivery driver, but specifically for me. A cold, instinctive terror spread through my stomach. The figure slowly raised one arm. Its movements were smooth and unsettling, each gesture too controlled, too deliberate, like a puppet guided by invisible strings. In its hand, something dangled. At first, I thought it was a branch, or maybe a strip of bark, but as it swung closer to the light, I saw what it really was. A phone. My phone. The same model, the same cracked case on the corner. The phone that had been sitting in my cup holder only seconds ago. Yet when I glanced down, the cup holder was empty. My throat tightened. The figure held the phone up to its non-existent face, and the screen flickered on by itself. A soft blue light illuminated the fog. The GPS app opened again, only this time there was no fake address, no route through the forest. Instead, the screen displayed a single message in red, pulsing letters. "You are late. Deliver yourself." A sound broke the silence then, a wet, dragging shuffle from behind me. Another figure stepped onto the road, then another, and another. They emerged from the trees like shadows peeling themselves off the bark. Too tall, too thin, each of them moving in that same unnatural glide. Their faces, if they even had faces, were hidden behind folds of fog that clung to them like veils. My body locked in place as they began to encircle the car. Not attacking, not rushing, just closing in slowly, like predators savoring the fear radiating off their prey. I forced myself to move. My trembling hand reached for the door lock, but before my finger touched it, the lock clicked open by itself. The driver's side door eased outward, pushed by something I couldn't see. A thin, long-fingered hand curled around the edge of the metal. I snapped. Survival overrode terror. I leaned across the seat, slammed the door shut with every ounce of strength I had, and jammed my finger on the lock button until it clicked repeatedly. My breath came in ragged bursts. The figure stopped moving, as if my resistance amused them. The phone in the creature's hand lit up again. The message changed. "We accept the delivery. Open the door." I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my back against the seat. Outside, they began tapping in unison. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Not asking for entry, demanding it. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, until it vibrated through the metal of the car and into my ribs. I gripped the steering wheel with both hands, though I had no idea why. There was nowhere to drive, no road ahead, only the cliff waiting to swallow me whole. The creatures outside seemed to know that. They tapped with the confidence of something that already owned me. I forced myself to look up. Through the fogged windshield, I could see their silhouettes more clearly now. The tall, twisted figures stood shoulder to shoulder, forming a broken circle around the car. Their limbs bent at angles no human joints could manage. Some had arms that dangled past their knees, others had necks that stretched unnaturally long, their heads swaying slowly like they were scenting the air. But the worst part wasn't their shapes. It was their stillness. They didn't breathe. They didn't twitch. They didn't blink. They waited perfectly motionless, as if time itself bowed around them. My phone, the real one, the one I thought I still had, vibrated violently inside the creature's hand. It raised the device toward the windshield, showing the screen to me like an offering or an order. New text flashed across it. We cannot enter. You must open." My mouth went dry. They were bound by a rule, a limitation, something that kept them from pulling the doors off the hinges and dragging me into the trees. But whatever that rule was, it was thinning, fading, the way frost melts on glass before it breaks. The fog thickened around the car, creeping along the ground like living smoke. It seeped under the chassis, curled up around the tires, and began to rise along the windows. When it reached the glass, the tapping stopped abruptly. Silence pressed against the vehicle. Then, something new happened. A faint, rasping breath echoed inside the car. Inside. I jerked my head toward the back seat, dread clawing up my spine. At first, I saw nothing, just the dark upholstery, the shape of my jacket thrown sloppily to one side, and the outline of my delivery bag. But then, the darkness shifted. Not a figure, not a face, just a shape, crouched low, too low for any normal human posture. Something about its form was wrong, like a person bent into a position bones were never meant to allow. It inhaled again. A wet, rattling gasp, as though lungs filled with mud were struggling to function. My hands shook uncontrollably as I reached toward the door handle, not to open it, but to prepare myself. Because whatever was inside the car with me was already breaking the rules the others were bound to. And it was moving. Slowly, painfully, like it had been waiting in the shadows for the right moment to unfold itself. A single, pale hand slid into view from behind the driver's seat. Not outside, not tapping, inside the car. And it wasn't alone. The pale hand tightened its grip on the edge of the driver's seat, the tendons beneath the skin pulling taut like ropes about to snap. Its fingers were far too long, each one thin, bone-like, ending in a grayish nail that looked more like a shard of stone than keratin. As it pulled itself upward, the air inside the car grew heavier, thicker, as if the creature brought the forest's suffocating fog with it. I pressed myself back against the door, instinct screaming at me to get out, to run, even if it meant jumping off the cliff. Anything was better than sharing a confined space with whatever was unfolding itself from the shadows. The thing's head rose slowly behind me, not fast, not jerking, but with an awful, deliberate patience, as if it savored every second of revealing itself. Its face, or what resembled a face, was shrouded in strands of stringy, wet hair that clung to an elongated skull. Beneath the tangled mess, I saw no eyes, just hollow, dark sockets, deep and empty, like something had scooped them clean long ago. When its jaw opened, it didn't open like a human's. It unhinged, stretching downward until it looked wide enough to swallow a fist. A low, rattling groan seeped out of its throat, vibrating through the car's cramped interior. My hand fumbled for the door lock, but before I could slam it open, the creature inside the car reached out with its other hand. Its palm hovered inches from my face, trembling, as if it were smelling me, or sensing me in some way I couldn't understand. Outside, the tapping began again, faster this time. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. Faster. Harder. Desperate. The circle of tall figures outside suddenly pressed closer to the vehicle, their silhouettes crowded around the windows, their bizarre limbs rapping against the fogged glass, as though they were trying to warn me, or claim me. But none of them reached for the door handles. They still couldn't enter. Whatever had snuck into the car, it wasn't bound by their rules. The creature behind me leaned closer, its breath faint and wet, brushing the back of my neck. Cold spread across my skin like ink leaking through paper. Its jaw clicked as it opened wider, vertebrae popping softly in a sickening rhythm. I realized then, the thing wasn't attacking. It was waiting. Waiting for me to open the door. Waiting for me to invite the others in. The fog outside thickened until the world beyond the car disappeared. Only their shapes remained, tall, shifting silhouettes pressing closer, tapping harder, creating a chorus of hollow strikes that merged into a frantic rhythm. The creature inside the car let out another guttural groan, and this time it reached not for me, but for the door lock. Its long finger touched the metal. The lock clicked. Once. Twice. It was trying to unlock the door, and I was the only barrier left.
The lock clicked halfway before I slammed my hand against it, stopping the mechanism with a jolt. My palm stung from the impact, but I didn't care. I couldn't let it open, not even an inch. The creature beside me reacted instantly. Its head snapped toward my movement, jaw gaping wider as a wet, guttural hiss spilled out, vibrating through the cabin like a swarm of insects buzzing inside metal walls. It was close enough now that I could feel the cold radiating off its skin. Not just cold, lifeless, as if whatever animated it wasn't warmth, blood, or breath, but something hollow and ancient. Outside, something changed. The tapping stopped, all at once. The silence that followed hit the car like a physical pressure, making my ears ring. I risked a look toward the windshield. The tall silhouettes had stopped knocking, frozen again, but not in the same passive stillness as before. They were leaning in, every one of them. Their long necks craned toward the car, their eyeless faces pressed so close to the glass that the fog parted around them like water bending around stone. Their bodies formed a jagged barrier, enclosing the car so tightly that no light could slip through. They weren't trying to scare me anymore. They were watching, waiting for the moment the door opened. A soft clicking sound pulled my attention back inside. The creature's fingers, impossibly long, impossibly thin, were inching toward the lock again. Its joints shifted with a sickening pop, bending at angles that defied anatomy. When it reached the lock, it didn't press it. Instead, it traced the edge of the metal. Gently, almost tenderly, as though the lock itself was the invitation it wanted me to give. "No," I whispered, barely audible. "No, no, no." My voice cracked. The creature froze when it heard me, its head lifted, the empty sockets where eyes should have been fixed on me, even though there was nothing there to see. Its jaw clicked shut with a sound like two stones grinding together. Then, incredibly, it leaned closer, close enough that its hair brushed my shoulder. A voice rose from its throat. But it wasn't a growl. It wasn't a hiss. It wasn't even human. It was my voice, perfectly mimicked. "Open the door," it whispered. My blood turned to ice. It repeated the phrase again, this time trembling, as if trying to learn the shape of the words. "Open the door." Outside, the silhouettes reacted immediately. Their heads snapped upward in unison, like predators smelling blood. The fog pulsed around them, swirling with unnatural excitement. I was running out of time. The creature inside the car lifted one finger and pressed it against the lock. The metal trembled under its touch. Halfway between locked and unlocked, just one push away from sealing my fate. My breath shook, my heart hammered, my thoughts fragmented into survival instincts and raw terror. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If that lock clicked open, if that door swung even a quarter inch, they would drag me into the forest, and no one would ever find me again. The creature leaned in until its mouth hovered beside my ear. "Let us in." The creature's whisper slithered into my ear like a cold needle, and for a moment, the world outside the car seemed to pulse in response. The tall figures pressed even closer against the windows, their silhouettes bending around the metal frame like vines tightening around prey. The fog thickened until it felt like the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for my answer. My mind fractured between two equally terrifying truths. I couldn't open the door, but I also couldn't stay inside with this thing much longer. The creature's long finger remained poised over the lock, trembling with anticipation. Every slight movement it made sent ripples through its limbs, like its body was barely holding together. Its head twitched, jaw splitting open again in that grotesque, unhinged angle. The sound that escaped it was not human. It was a rasping imitation of breath, like it was trying to simulate something it had never truly possessed. Outside, the figures stood completely motionless once more. But this time, it was different. There was no tapping, no crooked leaning, no subtle glide. They were statues, waiting statues. Each one pointed toward the door, as if every part of their existence hinged on whether that lock clicked open. My pulse hammered in my throat. The air felt thick enough to choke on. I steadied myself, forcing whatever courage I had left to surface. A thought flickered in my mind. They can't enter unless I open the door. That was the rule. I didn't know why, I didn't know who made it, but it was the only edge I had. And the creature inside the car, the one who had bypassed that rule entirely, had only one purpose: to make me give that invitation. Its voice came again, scraping against my eardrum with unbearable precision. Open the door. Not a demand now, a plea, a desperate one, as if it needed them to come in just as badly as they needed me to let them. The lock rattled under its fingertip. I slapped its hand away. The creature jerked violently, its body twisting in unnatural angles, limbs bending inward like a collapsing spider. It let out a guttural shriek, high-pitched, furious, and almost childlike in its frustration. Its hands flailed, scraping the fabric of the seats, the ceiling, the door, moving too fast and too erratically to follow. Outside, the tall figures responded instantly. Their heads snapped upward, then downward, then toward the car, in a synchronized lurch. The fog around them surged forward, smothering the vehicle in a thick white curtain. I grabbed the steering wheel like it was a lifeline. My foot slammed the gas pedal to the floor. The tires spun against the gravel, skidding, struggling for traction as the car roared forward, toward the cliff I had almost driven off earlier. For a split second, panic stabbed through me. There was nowhere to go. But the fog shifted, just barely, revealing the faint outline of a narrow path cutting sharply to the right, one I hadn't seen before. A path the GPS had never shown. A path that looked like it shouldn't exist. I didn't think, I didn't look. I just turned the wheel hard. The car lurched violently. The creature inside slammed against the door with a bone-cracking thud. The tall silhouettes outside blurred into streaks as the car shot forward into the unknown path. And behind me, all of them began to scream. The screams behind me were unlike anything born from a living throat. They rose in jagged, overlapping pitches, some deep enough to rattle the chassis of the car, others sharp enough to pierce straight into my skull. It sounded like dozens of beings tearing through their own shapes, like the forest itself was howling in outrage. I kept my foot crushed against the gas pedal. The car barreled down the narrow path, branches whipping against the windows hard enough to crack the glass. The headlights flickered violently, struggling to keep up with the sudden acceleration, illuminating only fragments of the twisted road ahead. Beside me, the creature that had invaded the car spasmed against the passenger door. Its limbs jerked out at impossible angles, as if the speed was tearing it apart from the inside. It slammed one hand against the dashboard, leaving streaks of something dark and viscous. The other hand clawed at its own chest, digging into its skin, peeling layers back as if trying to hold itself together. Its jaw snapped open and shut,
each time wider than before. A sound poured out, like wind being forced through a cracked flute. Then it spoke. Not in my voice this time. Not in any voice that belonged to something living. You were not meant to run. I didn't answer, couldn't. My hands gripped the wheel so tight, my knuckles felt ready to split open. The road twisted sharply, nearly invisible through the fog, but something primal inside me guided the steering. Panic, instinct, desperation. The creature slammed forward as I swerved left. Its elongated torso folded over itself, neck snapping sideways with a dull crack that didn't seem to bother it at all. Its head rotated slowly toward me, rotating farther than any neck should allow, one full quarter turn, then more, until its face was nearly upside down, staring at me with its hollow sockets. "They want you back," it hissed. "You belong to them now." I felt the cliffside just beyond the tree line. One wrong turn, and the entire car would launch into the abyss. The path felt unnatural, carved not by humans, but by something that moved through the forest without needing a solid road. The creature lunged suddenly, not at the door, not at the lock, at me. Its hand wrapped around my wrist, cold as death, pulling with terrifying strength. The car jerked sideways, veering dangerously toward the edge. A wheel slipped over the side, gravel falling away into darkness. I screamed and yanked the wheel back, muscles straining as I fought against the creature's grip. The tires caught traction again, but barely, just enough to keep the car alive. The creature's other hand clawed toward my throat. Outside, the forest erupted. A thunderous roar tore through the fog, shaking the trees down to their roots. It wasn't the tall figures. It wasn't the creature in the car. It was the forest itself, bellowing like a wounded animal. The tall silhouettes appeared suddenly in the rearview mirror, sprinting, not gliding, toward me with horrifying speed. Their limbs bent and snapped as they moved, like they were breaking their own shapes to run faster. The fog behind them surged, pulled forward like a tidal wave. The creature inside the car shrieked, releasing my wrist. It twisted violently, tearing its own body sideways as if trying to escape the approaching silhouettes. Its jaw distended wider, a sound blasting from its throat so sharp I had to clamp my hands over my ears. Behind us, the figures were gaining. Fast, faster. The forest path narrowed again, my vision blurred with terror. The creature thrashed in the seat, body glitching like a corrupted image. Then, the fog on the road ahead split open. In its place was a structure. A lone house. Old, rotten, standing crooked on the edge of a clearing, as if it had been waiting for centuries. The car sped toward it, and I realized with a rising dread, whatever lived in that house was what the forest had been guiding me toward. The car shot toward the crooked house like it was being pulled by an invisible hook. Every instinct in me screamed to brake, to turn, to flee in any direction. But the steering wheel had gone rigid in my hands, locked, dead, as if the car itself had surrendered to whatever force ruled this cursed forest. The creature beside me shrieked again, its body twisting in violent spasms. The skin along its spine peeled back, splitting open like wet paper as something underneath pushed outward, something sharp, skeletal, eager to escape. Its fingers clawed at the window, leaving deep grooves in the glass. Behind us, the tall silhouettes burst through the fog in a collective surge. Their limbs tangled, tore, and reformed as they sprinted, each movement fueled by something feral and ravenous. They weren't trying to stop me from reaching the house. They were driving me to it. The clearing opened before me, and I finally saw the house clearly. Its windows were boarded up from the outside, as if someone had tried desperately to keep something inside, not out. The roof sagged under decades of decay, and a single porch light flickered weakly, as though it had been waiting, flickering for years, for me specifically. The car skidded to a stop just feet from the broken front steps. The engine died instantly. The headlights went black, and the forest fell silent. Not peaceful silent, not empty silent. A silence with weight, a silence that watched. The creature inside the car stopped thrashing. Slowly, painfully, it turned its head toward the house. Its jaw quivered as though trying to form a word. When it finally spoke, the voice was neither mine nor the inhuman rasp from before. It was a whisper filled with dread. Home. The tall silhouettes arrived seconds later. They surrounded the car in a tight, unnatural ring. But instead of attacking, they all turned toward the house as well, heads tilting with unsettling reverence, like disciples awaiting their God. My breath hitched as the front door creaked open. No wind touched it. No hand pushed it. It simply opened, as if reacting to my presence. A long hallway stretched beyond the threshold, swallowing all light. Something moved inside. Slow, heavy, dragging. The creature beside me pressed its forehead against the window, trembling, muttering a single phrase. "It's awake, it's awake, it's awake." Something stepped into view. Not fully, just an outline. Massive, bent, wrong. It didn't walk, it unfolded. And every tall figure outside the car dropped to its knees in unison, heads bowed so violently their necks cracked. A pressure filled the air, thick and suffocating, pressing me back into my seat. My lungs refused to fill. My heart pounded painfully against my ribs. Then the thing inside the house spoke. Its voice didn't come from the doorway. It came from inside my head. "You delivered yourself well." My hands shook violently as the car doors unlocked on their own with a deafening clack. One by one, front doors, back doors, trunk. The creature inside the car smiled for the first time, its jaw hanging open, flesh tearing at the corners. It whispered, "Go, it's waiting." Outside, the kneeling silhouettes lifted their heads, empty sockets glowing with the faintest, sickening light. And in that moment, I understood the truth. The delivery order, the impossible tip, the fake address, the path that shouldn't exist. None of them were accidents. I hadn't been lured. I hadn't been tricked. I had been summoned. The pressure inside my skull tightened. The voice spoke again. "Come inside." The house waited. The forest held its breath. The creatures leaned closer. And the last thing I remember before everything went black was my hand reaching for the door handle without my permission.